A third round of talks between Indian farmers and government officials have reportedly ended at an impasse, with both sides unable to come to a compromise. Farmers are demanding higher prices for their crops.
Well, the discontent has resulted in protests this week as thousands of farmers try to make their way to New Delhi in tractors. Farmers' unions say the latest round of talks were inconclusive. Indian government officials are arguing that farmer demands for higher prices are not possible at present. They say farmers already benefit from minimum prices on paddy, sugarcane, as well as cotton.
But farmers are pressing for that support to be extended to all crops. More talks are expected on Sunday. The farmers say they will continue their protest peacefully. The farmers form an influential voting bloc, and the protests come a few months before national elections, in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi is seeking to win a third term.
मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि अब पंजाब के लिए ही नहीं, पूरे देश भर के किसानों के लिए, हमारे लिए ये ज़िंदगी और मौत का सवाल है। अभी पाँव कट भी जाए, टांग भी कट जाए, तो ये मोर्चा आगे लेकर जाना हमारे लिए हमारे भविष्य का सवाल है, हमारे पेट का सवाल है, हमारे बच्चों का सवाल है। इसलिए हम इतनी इंजरी को कोई बहुत बड़ा इंजरी नहीं मानते। अगर इससे बड़ा भी हुआ तो मोर्चे के साथ जाएंगे।
Meantime, a separate protest will see shops, markets and businesses stay closed across India today. The two protests are called by different organizations, but broadly they have similar demands. Officials have called on protesters to avoid obstructing roads.
उनका जो तरीका है उस तरीके पर ही आपत्ति है। दिल्ली जाने में आपत्ति नहीं है। आखिर ट्रांसपोर्ट, पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट है, ट्रेन हैं या बसेज हैं या अपने वाहन लोगों के, उसमें जाए, लेकिन ट्रैक्टर जो है इट इज नॉट मोड ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्ट।
We are joined by Sumit Ganguly, a distinguished professor of political science at Indiana University, Bloomington. Professor Ganguly, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, we've seen these mass farmers' protests before in 2020 in India. Why are they protesting again now, and how long do you think they can sustain them?
A couple of different reasons. The most compelling one at the moment is that national elections are coming up in either April or May of this year. And it's very likely it's going to stretch from April to May, because typically the national elections take close to 6 weeks to conclude, given the sheer size of the country's population and the geographic spread that's involved. And consequently, the farmers see this as an opportune moment to raise this issue with the Modi government, especially because the earlier protests did not yield the results that they had wanted.
Professor Ganguly, does it also explain why the farmers have been blocked over 200 kilometers away from New Delhi? Is it a question of optics? Are the authorities determined to keep them away from the capital?
Yes, it's certainly a matter of optics, but beyond optics, it's also highly disruptive because, here is a city of over 11 million people where foodstuffs have to be brought in, where manufactured goods from the greater metropolitan area leave, where trains come in, massive commuter trains. And if the farmers are allowed to block these principal avenues, it could wreak havoc on the economy.
Professor, we have been reading and looking at reports about the use of tear gas and water cannon. Farmers, meantime, claiming that plastic and rubber bullets have also been used against them. I want to ask you about the possibility of things getting out of hand and impacting the elections that you alluded to. I mean, we hear that they've largely been peaceful and very communal, and we also note that, 2/3 of India's entire population depends on agriculture in some way or other?
That is absolutely right. The statistic that you quoted, a disproportionate segment of India's population does depend upon agriculture. But the interesting thing is the people who are leading this demonstration are not poor, desperate farmers. These are actually well-to-do farmers who would benefit significantly from the creation of a minimum support price for various agricultural commodities. And on this occasion, my sentiments are largely with those of the government, which are holding back against the minimum support price because there are certain crops that should not be grown in particular parts of India because of the terrible environmental consequences. They should be switching to other crops given the nature of climate change. But the farmers constitute an important lobby. The wealthier farmers are well organized, and consequently, they know that if they create a ruckus, the government will be obligated to respond.
Professor, if I may ask a question about the upcoming elections. I mean, just yesterday, India's Supreme Court banned electoral bonds. I mean, this is, of course, referring to mysterious source of funding for elections that have generated hundreds of millions of dollars for political parties. So just how big a setback is this for Mr. Modi's BJP, and what sort of implications could this have for the upcoming elections?
It is an enormous setback. When I read about it this morning in one of the Indian newspapers I routinely follow, I couldn't believe my own eyes because this is a extraordinarily bold decision on the part of the Supreme Court, signed no less than the Chief Justice himself. And this will have enormous consequences, particularly for the ruling party, because it is widely known that they were significant beneficiaries of this highly opaque system of electoral bonds, where powerful industrial conglomerates could contribute to the coffers of a political party without anybody scrutinizing who they were contributing to. And it is widely suspected that they were mostly contributing to the ruling party, which is firmly ensconced in power at the moment. So it is a body blow to the Modi government.
Professor Ganguly, is the ruling final, though, or does the Modi government have other means of appeal?
No. The Supreme Court, as you might imagine, is the final arbiter. It's the final judicial body. Who else are you going to appeal to? There is no higher authority. I think that this is a really significant development and actually underscores the willingness of the Supreme Court to take a highly controversial issue and decide on it months before the election. This is a momentous decision.
Professor, this ruling, of course, and the farmer demonstrations come as Mr. Modi has been quite busy overseas. He inaugurated the first Hindu temple in the UAE, a predominantly Muslim country. And also, this comes just weeks after he consecrated that controversial Hindu temple in Ayodhya. So how do you think Modi's promotion of Hinduism might be perceived domestically and also internationally?
Well, internationally, it has caused considerable concern that a plural, secular India is probably under assault. India has imperfectly, albeit, but nevertheless, always had a commitment to religious pluralism. Not that it worked out in practice perfectly, but nevertheless, there was a constitutional and even a political commitment to religious pluralism. That has really been under assault in the last several years, particularly under Modi. So it's caused considerable worry abroad. Within India, it is mostly an elite concern. The vast majority of people in India are concerned about much more bread and butter issues, about how inflation affects their wallets and the like, though a certain segment of the population, especially the intelligentsia, have been acutely concerned about the retreat from religious and cultural pluralism. Modi has been mostly oblivious to these concerns. And with his inauguration of the temple in Ayodhya, following the destruction of a mosque that took place in December 1992, attempts then also to cater to the Indian diaspora in the Gulf, as you alluded to the opening of this massive temple. And the Gulf states have been happy to go along with India because India provides a certain level of security to the Gulf. India has extensive trade relations with the Gulf, and millions of skilled and unskilled Indian workers work in the Gulf. So the Gulf leadership is willing to overlook the building of a temple in a predominantly Muslim land because of other material factors that are at play.
Understood, Professor. We do have to go, but we thank you so much for your valuable insights. Sumit Ganguly is Distinguished Professor of Political Science at Indiana University, Bloomington. Thank you very much, sir.